Next up for the 4-0 Volunteers, the 3-2 Arkansas Razorbacks. Who are the Hogs? What do they do well? What do they not do well? It's going to be an interesting one on Saturday. I'll tell you why right here on Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Kane. Can't thank you enough for being here and being a part of the show. We call you guys everydayers who come back every single day. Not rocket science there, everydayers. But this show is nothing without you guys, and your time to shine is coming up in segments 2 and 3. I'm going to answer several of your questions that you sent in for the mailbag show. But first, here in the matter of a moment, we're going to talk about Arkansas, relive what Arkansas has done so far this season, 5 games in, and talk about how Tennessee is going to stack up against the Razorbacks here for a Tuesday show. Josh Ward coming up for Ward Wednesday on tomorrow's show. All that and more. We're going to have a crossover with John Neighbors of Locked On Hogs coming up later in the week, or Locked On Razorbacks. We're going to get you set for Tennessee and Arkansas. Don't you worry about that. Today's episode is brought to you in part by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can place $5. Your first $5 bet, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you need to do is visit FanDuel.com to go ahead and get started today. So, who is Arkansas? Well, Arkansas is 3-2 on the year. They're 1-1 in SEC play. Revamped offense. KJ Jefferson gone to UCF. Rocket Sanders gone to South Carolina. A number of offensive linemen, I think 2 specifically, transferred out over the offseason. Sam Pittman is very much on the hot seat. And when you're on the hot seat and, desperate times call for desperate measures, right? You will do anything to save your job. And I like Sam Pittman. I don't think there's many people that dislike Sam Pittman. He's a football guy. He likes to drink beer. He's just kind of a dude's dude, right? But he's on the hot seat, no doubt about it, because Arkansas was really bad last year. 4-8, 1-7 in conference play, 9 rushing touchdowns all told in 2023. So you had to do something to revamp that offense. And so what do? You go out and bring in a former head coach for Arkansas, Bobby Petrino. Of course, he was at Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher. Last year, that didn't pan out. Now he's at Arkansas, and we know how things ended at Arkansas for Bobby Petrino. It's coming full circle here. He's now on the sidelines as the offensive coordinator. But, so far so good to an extent offensively, and I'll get into that here in a moment. But Arkansas is kind of a desperate team. You look what's coming up on that schedule, no doubt. They've already, performed and played pretty decent in 2 games in the SEC. Did come up short on Saturday. I don't think that was a good game offensively, of course, for Arkansas, losing by 4 points, 21-17, being held to 3 points in the second half. Was able to grind out a win at Auburn on the Plains, forcing 5 turnovers defensively. It's a reason why they had that 10-point victory, 24-14. But defensively, 31 combined points in 2 SEC football games so far the last 2 weeks. Now, I'm not trying to say that Auburn or Texas A&M are, setting any records offensively, but not a bad start to conference play in the Southeastern Conference. Other games, prior to conference play for Arkansas, started the season off with a 70-0 win over Arkansas Pine Bluff. Okay, went on the road, and I watched the second half of this football game, and both teams just tried to give the game away so many different times. Some poor coaching decisions by Arkansas, towards the end of regulation at Oklahoma State. Number 16 Oklahoma State lost that game 39-31 in double overtime. And then, of course, a 37-27 win over UAB. So that's kind of the storyline so far for Arkansas. They've tallied multiple turnovers in 3 of the 5 football games. 3 turnovers at Oklahoma State, 2 against Auburn, 3 against Texas A&M this past week. Against A&M, Arkansas blew 3 different leads. Went up 7-0. A&M came and tied it 7-7. Went up 10-7. A&M came and tied it 10-10 or something like that. I mean, they had the lead 3 different times, and were never able to hold on to that. So you had a lot of guys that left the program last year. You had a lot of guys that entered the program over the offseason. We'll talk about quarterback Taylen Green from Boise State here in a moment. Center Addison Nichols, of course, coming over from Tennessee. Jaquindon Jackson, running back from Utah. He's been really good so far. Anton Jansai, I believe is how you say his name, an edge rusher from Albany. Xavier Sori from Georgia, who's been really good at linebacker. And, of course, Danico Slaughter as well, coming over from Tennessee to start at nickelback for the Arkansas Razorbacks so far this season. But Overall, it's a team that has shown improvements offensively. It's a team that's been pretty stout defensively after not necessarily in keeping opponents off the scoreboard last year, but from total defense, they were improved by almost 100 yards from 2022 to 2023. So it's a team that's okay. I don't think this is a team that's very good. I don't think this is a team that's very bad. I think it's an okay team. Now, is okay good enough to keep Sam Pittman's job? I don't know. I don't cover Arkansas. I don't care. But for this weekend, when Tennessee rolls into Fayetteville, I think Tennessee's going to be challenged, but I think Tennessee, by and large, is going to control this football game and win comfortably, in my opinion. Let's go offensively first. 495 yards is what Arkansas averages through 5 games. 283 through the air, 212 on the ground, 9 turnovers. On third downs, they're converting on 55%. So all that looks pretty good. The rushing stats look good. 9 turnovers does not look good. Taylen Green, kind of, Brent Hope said this on Monday afternoon, and I think it's a good way to describe it, kind of feast or famine. And as I said on yesterday's show, I don't want to backtrack, but I maybe want to clarify. I haven't looked in the comment section, so who knows what you guys have said. But I think he'll be the best quarterback Tennessee's faced so far because Jackson Arnold was not. He was benched in the second quarter. Grayson McCall was not. He was nothing against Tennessee. We're not going to take into account the quarterback for Kent State or UTC and give Tennessee's defense credit in that regard. But I think Taylen Green, transfer from Boise State, is going to make some plays. I also think he's going to make some plays for the Tennessee defense. Third in the SEC in passing right now, 1,236 yards, but he's only completing passes at 54%. Not very accurate. 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He is the second leading rusher behind Jackson. All told, if you take sacks out of it, he's garnered over 400 yards on the ground, but his net rushing total is 331. He's got 4 rushing TDs, so you've got gap integrity, you've got setting the edge. All that's going to be very important this week defensively for Tennessee against a mobile quarterback in Taylen Green. Jaquindon Jackson, coming over from Utah, has been really good. Currently leading the SEC in rushing. If Dylan Sampson would have played all available quarters and, of course, didn't have a bye week, Dylan Sampson would be leading the SEC in rushing. He leads the SEC in rushing yards per game as it is. But Jackson's been really good. 79 attempts, 509 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns. Again, only 9 rushing touchdowns total for Arkansas in 2023. They now have as a team 18 already, which is really, really good. Not one go-to wide receiver. 4 pass catchers have all reeled in, 5 pass catchers have each reeled in a touchdown apiece. Nobody has more than 2 touchdown receptions on the year. That's including a pair of tight ends. But the wide receivers you got to look out for is Andrew Armstrong, leads the way with 29 receptions. I thought whenever I watched some of the game against Texas A&M over the weekend that Isaac Tesla looked really good. He's got 205 yards on the season so far. But that offensive line, run blocking again, really good. 5.2 yards per carry, 18 rushing touchdowns. But it's given up 33 TFLs. It's given up 12 sacks. So not very good in protecting its quarterback for sure. And one kind of under the radar thing I want to point out about this matchup as well, as we'll continue to talk about this all week long. Kyle Ramsey, the field goal kicker for Arkansas, 6 of 10 on the year. He's 4 for 8 in the 40-yard range, 40 to 49. It's not very good. That's not very consistent. He has made a 51-yarder on the season, so he's got a leg, but not very accurate. Defensively, it's looked pretty good. It's looked pretty stingy. Josh Heupel said it's playing like one of the best defensive units in the country right now. 319 yards, 226 through the air, 93 yards allowed on the ground, which is really solid. Created 7 turnovers. It's pretty stingy on third downs at 31%. Starts up front with Landon Jackson, formerly of LSU. He's been in Fayetteville for 2 years now. He had 2 sacks against A&M, but a pretty good player, leads the team in sacks and TFLs. Outside of him on the defensive front, not a whole lot doing. I mentioned that guy with the Anton Jusea, I believe is how you say his name. He transferred from Albany, where he had 15 sacks last year and like 21 and a half TFLs. So far, just 1 TFL for Arkansas, so it hasn't translated from FCS to FBS just yet, but he was a big-time offseason addition for the Razorbacks. Linebacker Xavier Sorey transferred over from Georgia. He leads the team, 32 tackles, 4 TFLs. In the back end, Danico Slaughter's at star. He's got a pretty solid stat line, 27 tackles, third on the team, has a sack, 2 TFLs, 3 PBUs, and an interception. So Danico Slaughter's done pretty well so far. Remember, he started the very first game of his career, 2020 at South Carolina, as the star player because Tennessee had some players out with COVID. And then he never played star again. He played a little safety, played some corner, never played star again. Of course, that was under a different regime. TJ Metcalf and Jaden Johnson are 2 experienced safeties. They play a couple of different cornerbacks, including Jaheim Singletary, who has an interception this year. He's formerly of Georgia. TJ Metcalf has actually 3 interceptions at the safety position. So it's a pretty stout defense overall. But it doesn't get after the quarterback that much. I mean, it's okay. I mean, 5 games, 10 sacks, 26 TFLs. Tennessee doesn't have 10 sacks, but Tennessee has 33 TFLs in 4 games. So, played 1 game fewer. But, it's a pretty solid unit again, but I don't think that this is a unit that's going to hold Tennessee down for long. I think it'll punch. It will be louder than at Oklahoma. So that's something that we got to pay attention to. Crowd noise, how do you deal with all that? Because it was not quiet at Oklahoma, but it wasn't loud, if you know what I'm saying. But that's who Arkansas is. It's a team that Tennessee is currently favored to win by 13.5 points. The total is at 60. I like Tennessee to go in there and do what Tennessee does. But before we start our conversations throughout the week on, I like this matchup, etc., that is who Arkansas has been so far. Turnover happy on offense. At times, defensively, has been forcing a lot of turnovers. 5 turnovers forced at Auburn on the road 2 weeks ago. I think that's a real critical point in our analysis so far this week. But that is who the Hogs are to date. But again, I think Tennessee's going to be able to go in and handle some business. Just my opinion here on a Tuesday morning. Hey, when we come back, we'll get into your mailbag questions. All that and more is coming up next as we continue on here with the Tuesday Locked On Vols. It's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS and Android and enter the referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 in cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. This week, we've selected, again, it was the bye week, so I'm just going to pick a little bit right here. And the player that I've picked is Keenan Pili this week. Keenan Pili's been a huge addition to Tennessee's defense, healthy. He plays in space better than I ever thought that he would. You knew he'd be a thumper inside the tackle box, but his quickness, his aggression, his mentality, I think, has been huge for Tennessee's defense so far. That has done nothing short but dominate so far in the early season. So I'm giving Keenan Pili $100 on Roy. If you were impressed as we were with his performance so far this season, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy and throw him a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just $10, it adds up fast for Keenan Pili this week. Now you have a chance to show your appreciation for Keenan Pili and his standout performance so far this season, as well as what he'll continue to do for the Tennessee Volunteers. Get off the sideline and into the NIL game today with Roy. Support players. Change the game with Roy today. Hey guys, welcome back into your Tuesday morning edition of Locked On Vols. Now we get into that part where we do the mailbag show. Each and every Tuesday, you get to take over the show, you everydayers, sending me in questions via DMs, tweeting me at _Caner, putting it up on the YouTube channel, all that and more. And I've got a lot of submissions here, so we'll take our time over the next 2 segments and answer some of those questions. All right, this is from Grizzly Bear 230. Do you see both Hurd and Campbell getting healthy for Arkansas this week? I can only go on what Josh Heupel said. He said last week during the bye week that he believes that both those guys are going to be back ready to go. We thought that Lance Hurd was close and ready to roll last week. Turns out he wasn't. He's had a whole week to recoup and rehab and try to get right. I would assume that he's going to be ready to go, but again, never say never, right? John Campbell's a situation where I just think that he's not going to ever make it through an entire game, and that's unfortunate, but he's got some knee issues, and he's not played over 35 snaps in a football game this season. So I think he'll always be available and ready to roll. Just how long can he last? I don't know. We'll have to see. I know that's not ideal, but it just kind of is what it is. Alpha Kane says, did you know that Ryan Williams is 17 years old? I heard that somewhere. I'm not sure where I heard that, but I heard it somewhere over the weekend. That's a good note right there. Morris Davis says, if UT's offensive line doesn't man up and leaves it up to Nico to have to figure it out instead of allowing Nico to quarterback, we're in for some unnecessary losses. Why does UT always find a way to beat themselves? I think more than anything, it was just health, against Oklahoma. And it's prisoner of the moment. I recognize that. But, the offensive tackle play and pass pro was not good against Oklahoma. But you also didn't have your two starters out there for the majority of the time. One didn't play at all, and one was only out there for a couple of snaps. So you just got to stay healthy. You got to stay healthy. You got to man up. I also think that defensive front for Oklahoma is going to be one of the better ones Tennessee sees all year. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying, beat themselves. Sure. Yeah, at points and times, but tip your cap to Oklahoma, and it's unfortunate that some of Tennessee's players were sidelined. I think that had more to do with it than Tennessee beating themselves. Danny says, what is the status of Sham? I've not heard anything about his injury. Yeah, Sham's going to be out a few weeks. Last I heard, of course, messed up his lower leg, ankle there in that play. I guess that was the Kent State game, I believe. So last I heard, I think Sham's going to miss a couple of weeks. We'll go to TJ. What's your outlook about our games against Bama and Georgia after watching their game on Saturday? A really good football game to watch as a viewer. Defense, points and times for both teams just did not show up. I saw some weaknesses at points and times for both of those teams. I obviously saw some strengths. I think both of those teams are solid, good. Do I think Georgia is the power it's been the last 3 or 4 years? No, but do I still think Georgia is a college football playoff team and is really, really good? Absolutely. Alabama, I think Jalen Milroe is one of the best players in the country when he's on. He's not off a lot. When he's off, he's not, clearly. But you saw, when he's able to take over a game like he did against Georgia, what he's capable of. So, but overall, I think Tennessee can beat both those teams. I truly do. Now, I'm not saying Tennessee will beat both of those teams, but I think Tennessee, with its tempo, with its run game, with its defensive line, with its linebacker play, and, of course, the X factor, Dylan Sampson or even Nico Iamaleava, I think Tennessee can certainly win both of those games. So I wouldn't say that I came out of there encouraged, or I came out of there with a completely different mindset after watching that game, that Georgia nearly came all the way back, down 28-0, down 30-7 at the half to win. Briefly took the lead all for one play, and Alabama answered. But I think Tennessee can certainly win both of those games. Will they? To be determined, but we'll see. Let's see here. Yeah, Preston wanted to know that as well. Let's go. Bat Daddy 8357. With Alabama's win over Georgia and Georgia's second half almost comeback, how do you think we'll perform against them both? Yeah, a lot of questions here about Alabama and Georgia. Here's one from Ron Weasley. Ron Weasley's left ear. Okay. What's up, Harry Potter? What are Tennessee's biggest weaknesses that could keep us from winning a national championship, or even keep us out of the playoffs entirely? I got to stay healthy on the offensive line. Especially at tackle. Again, we saw, worst case scenario at Oklahoma, kind of what that looked like. So you've really got to keep your offensive tackles healthy, in my opinion. If you a key injury to tackle or to quarterback or somewhere, I mean, you're in trouble. And that's not just for Tennessee. That's the case for a lot of teams around the country. So that's just kind of the nature of the sport. But injuries would be the biggest thing. Protecting your quarterback at tackle, and continuing to get after the quarterback and make things difficult on third downs, which Tennessee's done. Tennessee's got the best third down defense so far in the country. Can't Read says, is Peyton Manning a top 3 quarterback in Tennessee history by the time Josh Heupel retires? I mean, I know where you're coming from, gets Heupel's offense and stats and everything that these quarterbacks are going to be doing, but I can't fathom a world where Peyton Manning is not considered one of the best quarterbacks to ever come through Tennessee, right? Talk about championships. If Tennessee goes on to win a national championship, of course, that's bigger than what Peyton did here. Heisman Trophy winners, we'll see. He should have won the Heisman, no doubt, but, technically he didn't. So individual awards, team awards. I know Josh Heupel's recruiting at a heck of a level. Nico and, G-Mac and Faison. But to answer your question, I just can't imagine. And somebody actually, in the comment section below this question, somebody says, yes, because Peyton played all 4 years and the rest of the quarterbacks are going to play 2, maybe 3. Well, if they play 2, they'd have to have a red shirt in there, so they'd be here 3 years. But that's a good point. Maybe they don't play the entire 4 years. I'm going to say yes. Peyton Manning is going to go down as one of the top 3 quarterbacks all time. Doesn't matter, if Heupel's here or not. Let's see here. Benjamin says, what's the status of Selden and Lewis? Do you see them getting any run through the rest of the season, or is it a Samson Bishop show? Right now, it's a Samson Bishop show. That's not to say that those 2 guys won't play or can't play, but I mean, it's one of those things, right? Where like we like all these players and we get mad when they're not playing, but you got to go out there and earn it. I'm not saying that Selden hadn't earned him. He's been hurt, and that's unfortunate. But in the meantime, Bishop's gone out there and has earned it. You know what I'm saying? So Bishop's gone out there, he's earned it, and he's playing at a level to where it's like, okay, we got to keep him in the lineup because he's top 10 in the league in rushing right now as a backup running back. So sure, could you put Cam Selden in there and have a little 3-headed monster like they did each of the last 3 seasons? You could. But right now, I'd roll with Samson and Bishop because they're playing really, really well. They're running hard, and it's been productive. So, we'll see. As far as Peyton Lewis, I mean, injuries, we'll see. But he's kind of 4th in line right now. But I would roll with Samson and Bishop until you give me a reason not to. Samson's always going to be RB1. I would roll with Bishop as his tag team partner until Bishop gives me a reason not to. Let's see here. Carla Jenkins says, what's 1 to 3 musts that Tennessee has to improve on in order to compete for the SEC championship and a possible playoff berth? Yeah, kind of going back to what I was saying, tackle depth, protecting the quarterback there, red zone efficiency. You got to score more touchdowns. I know a couple of those so far this season have been like kneel downs or the clocks run out at the end of the game of blowouts or whatever. But Tennessee's kind of fallen back into that habit and not cashing in for touchdowns in the red zone. So offensive tackle, protecting the quarterback, scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and eliminating the mobility of quarterbacks defensively, because that's something that's given Tennessee's defense issues at points in times. We'll go one more question here before we hit a quick break, and then we come back here for more questions. Let's see here. Are we going to see Mike Matthews or Nimrod in action this week? Well, to my knowledge, both are healthy. Both have been playing here lately. It's just kind of that wide receiver, right? You got Brew, you got Squirrel, you got Dante Thornton and Chris Brazzell. Nimrod's been in there a little bit as well, both at slot and at outside. And then you got Mike Matthews. Mike Matthews, again, is one of those guys where everybody wants to see him play. And he made some plays, and I think he's dynamic. I think he's going to be great. But is there a receiver on the outside? A lot of people are talking about him playing the slot. And again, unless I missed something, he's not a slot receiver. Are you going to bench Dante Thornton right now? Are you going to bench Chris Brazzell? I mean, nobody's gone off, but they both produce, right? You're not benching Brew McCoy. So it's kind of like there's only one football and there's a lot of mouths to feed. It's just kind of part of the process. So, I hope we get to see a little bit of both those guys. I just hope they continue rotating guys in and out of the lineup, because I think Tennessee is much better. The more guys you play, you're not as tired. There's a lot of difference playing 90 snaps on offense in a game compared to 50 or 60. Big difference in those fourth quarter ups and routes running to be as fresh as you can the rest of the way. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue into your mailbag questions. All that and more right here on Locked On Vols. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you view your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first bet, a $5 bet. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when your first $5 bet. That's really, really good over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's where you can make every moment more. FanDuel Sportsbook. Plus, when you look at the college game this weekend at Arkansas, Tennessee, a 13.5-point favorite on the road, okay? And the total is sitting at 60. You guys know I love the overs, except for Tennessee, Oklahoma. I took the under. I love the over on this one. Give me Tennessee and Arkansas to hit over the 60.5. Give me Tennessee to cover the 13.5, because I think Tennessee is just miles and miles better than what Arkansas is, even though I think Arkansas will provide a challenge. So all that and more in the college game, all that and more in the NFL game, you can do over at FanDuel Sportsbook this football season. Check it all out at the FanDuel Sportsbook app, FanDuel.com. It's where every moment is made more. FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into your Tuesday edition of Locked On Vols. We are hitting your mailbag questions for the everydayers, and we'll go back to Pertitious. What year do you believe Nico will leave for the NFL? Well, I mean, he's played just a couple of games right now. I think the plan's always for Nico to come in, be here as a freshman, 2 years of starting, and then go to the NFL after his third year. I mean, we'll see. I still think that's kind of the plan, but it's really, really early to kind of determine that. I think a lot of that's based on how he plays the remainder of this year and then certainly next year. But I would say after next year would be my guess right now. How well do you think our secondary will hold up against Alabama's wide receiver group? It's going to be tough, right? It's going to be really, really tough. Ryan Williams, great player. They got a couple other guys, even though after losing a couple of guys like John Mechie, that was a couple of years ago, Burton, Isaiah Bond. So far, so good. I like Tennessee's corners. I really do. I still have questions about Tennessee's safeties. I still think Tennessee's star position, the nickelback's got to grow up a little bit. But I really like Tennessee's corners. I do. I think Ricky Gibson and Jamal McCoy are a really nice tandem, probably the best tandem Tennessee's had at corner in quite some time. Will Nico get his Heisman moment against Arkansas, Florida, or Bama? Whew. Hendon had a couple Heisman moments against Florida and Bama. Give me Alabama at home. Neyland Stadium. Give me Nico Iamaleava's Heisman performance type game against Alabama. I think we'd certainly take one in that game and many more times against Arkansas or Florida, when Tennessee returns to home next week. Let's see here. Has Heupel been holding back the offense in order not to put certain things on tape leading up to bigger SEC games, or is Josh Heupel simply not the offensive coordinator or Joey Halzle simply not the offensive coordinator that Golich was? The offense hasn't been nearly as explosive as we've seen in other seasons. I would wholeheartedly disagree with that, with the exception of the second half against Oklahoma, when it was abundantly clear that Tennessee was riding the defense to win that game on the road because they couldn't protect their quarterback. Even in that game, you still had explosive plays. Tennessee had bukus of explosive plays against NC State, Kent State, and, of course, UT Chattanooga. So the sample size is small, don't get me wrong, but the explosive plays are in this offense for sure. Now, I think Joey Halzle's getting better. Last year, I think it was evident that you missed Alex Golich. I think Joey Halzle's coming along for sure. Does the fact that Tennessee hasn't played a good offense change how you view the defense? That's a really good question, and I don't have an answer for that right now. Like, I still view the defense in high regard because of the defensive line. I still view the defense in high regard because I think linebackers are easily the most improved position on the field. I don't have to see them play Alabama and Georgia to tell me that, okay? I can see it. Tennessee's linebackers are fast, and they're explosive, and their reactionary times are quicker. I like Tennessee's corners. Again, the top two corners, as I mentioned a moment ago. So that is a good question, though, because people will continue to say, yeah, but they hadn't done this. Or even me, I've already said, like, Tennessee's hasn't faced a really good quarterback yet. We thought it was going to be Grayson McCall. We thought it was going to be Jackson Arnold. Yet it really hasn't been. I think Taylen Green's going to give them their best shot so far this season, to this point in the season, before they get into DJ Lagway, Graham Mertz, or whoever's quarterbacking for Florida. And then, of course, Jalen Milroe coming up in the next couple of weeks. But it's a really, really good question. I would still say I would give Tennessee's defense all the praise so far, because a lot of what it's doing, it doesn't matter who you're playing, it's still really, really impressive. All right. Do you believe Tennessee gets in the playoffs at 10-2? Yes, 100% I do, especially after seeing what Ole Miss did this past weekend, losing to Kentucky. 100%. Tennessee's in the playoffs at 10-2 if those losses are to Alabama and Georgia for sure. If it's somebody else, I'll have to think about it, but I don't see Tennessee losing to anybody else other than potentially Alabama or Georgia. A couple more here, and then we'll call it quits. Hey, Eric, why do we have such great success recruiting defensive linemen, yet struggle to get things going with a solid offensive line depth? I know we do have some studs coming in, but how long till we can actually reliable depth on that offensive line? Aaron, the biggest difference here is defense is rotational. You come to play for Rodney Gardner, you know that if you're good, if you're worth your salt, you're going to play as a freshman. Because why? Well, Tennessee doesn't just play 4 defensive linemen. Tennessee plays 13. So it's very rotational. When it comes down to it offensively, those 5 positions are not rotational. Typically, you don't rotate offensive linemen in ball games. Tennessee does it some, but not much outside of injury. So for one, you can recruit really well on the defensive front and develop there because they play a lot more. I think Tennessee's done a nice job the last 2 classes recruiting offensive linemen. I think Jesse Perry's going to be good. I think Bennett Warren's going to be good. David Sanders is coming in. But none of those guys are ready right now. I do think there were some big-time misses a couple years ago in the recruiting cycles, especially at offensive tackle, and you're seeing that now. There was one cycle where Tennessee missed out on 4 offensive tackles, settled for Sham, and I think Sham's a good player, but Sham's a guard. So I think you're seeing the lack of depth there, either missing in the transfer portal, which you're going to the transfer portal to get a starter at that position, but missing in the transfer portal or missing in recruiting in years past, not necessarily these last 2 cycles. The couple of cycles before that is how I'd answer that. All right, let's see here. Jared says, Saul, Feinbaum say the UGA Bama game from this Saturday was the best he's ever seen, which seems silly. He's entitled to his subjectivity, but as a Vol alum, how could it not be UT Bama from 2022? Saban, Hyatt, 5 TDs, field goal for the win, snap and crazy losing streak. What do you think, Kaner? Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go Alabama and Tennessee, just because that game had it all. Tennessee had a comfortable lead, not a huge lead, nothing like Alabama had over Georgia, but it had a little bit of everything. You saw Alabama come back, take the lead. Tennessee hand the football away with that easy scoop and score for Dallas Turner. You saw the Heisman moment for both Hendon and for Jalen Hyatt. And you saw Tennessee, boot one through for the game winner. So I would go with that. So I'm not with Paul. I think that was prisoner of the moment a little bit. A couple more here. Let's go. Kinlan says, with all the talk about us making the playoffs, say we get mid-tier seeding, we have to travel to Ohio State to play them. How do we match up with them, and does the lack of elite opponents in the regular season give us a larger advantage? I don't know how Tennessee would stack up against Ohio State because I haven't studied Ohio State and I haven't watched them at all this year because I've been covering Tennessee. But the fact of not having an elite opponents on the regular season schedule for Ohio State, because Tennessee will have 2 by that point in time, and depending on what Oklahoma does as the year goes on, I agree with that. I think that would favor Tennessee for sure. Seth, do you think spying Milroe and doubling Ryan Williams is the recipe to beating Alabama? It'd be nice, right? Also, did you know Ryan Williams is 17? I'm glad we're getting some mileage out of that joke because, goodness gracious, it was one that we couldn't forget. You can't do that every single play. You physically don't have enough players to double Ryan Williams, whether it's a corner and a star, whether it's a corner and a safety over the top, whatever that case is. It's not straight double teaming like in basketball. You got man-to-man coverage and somebody's helping inside or over the top. But also to have a spy on Milroe, you can't do that every single play. So here's how I'd answer that. Ryan Williams is going to make plays. Jalen Milroe is going to make plays. They can't take over the game. You've got to slow them. You can't stop them. You have to slow them. Again, look at 2022 Bryce Young. He absolutely killed that game. He did great against Tennessee. But they didn't win the game. You slowed him just enough to where they didn't win the game. I'm not saying Milroe's got to go off like Bryce Young did in that football game, but that's kind of an example you look at. Like, he had a really, really good game, but he didn't win the game. So they're going to get theirs a little bit, but they can't take over. They can't do enough to win the game. That's kind of how I would attack that if I were Tennessee. Let's see here. Clayton says, not saying they won't get better, but what you think our pass protection would be better considering they go up against our defensive line every day? I know we've had some injuries, but second-string guys are still getting practice reps against defensive line the best defensive line in the country. Good point. And I'm not huge on Larry Johnson right now, but I will say I never envisioned Larry Johnson playing a snap at Tennessee this year. I just did. I never did. And he stepped in, and for all intents and purposes, he did a pretty good job against Oklahoma. So he is an example of just that constant going up against these guys every single day in practice, and iron sharpens iron. Larry Johnson is in a position to help and contribute when needed. And that's what he did against Oklahoma. So overall, sure. But I think Larry Johnson's a perfect example of, man, I never thought he'd play. And look, he played almost the entire game against Oklahoma and helping Tennessee win. All right, last one. Let's go to Dakota. Dakota says, after this weekend, do you believe Kentucky is better than advertised, or was Ole Miss overrated? This is 2 top teams they played good against. Yeah, that being Georgia and, of course, Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss was overrated. I also have no clue what to think about Kentucky. Kentucky got absolutely demolished by South Carolina on its home field. Demolished by South Carolina. And then that's a South Carolina team that almost lost to Old Dominion. And then you take Kentucky to the brink the next week. Who saw that coming? And then you knock off Ole Miss after getting pushed around in the first drive of the game. The trench play, typical Kentucky, came to play, and they responded the right way. So I don't know what to think about Kentucky, to be honest with you. Now, Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss is super talented. I think they've got some nice pieces on the defensive front. I think they got a nice quarterback. But I do think Ole Miss was a tad bit overrated. And that schedule don't help nobody. Missouri's schedule, soft. Ole Miss's schedule, soft. And when you play somebody with a pulse, if you don't come ready to play and you're sleepwalking a little bit, hello, they'll beat you. And that's what happened on Saturday. Appreciate you guys, as always, for sending in your questions, your comments, your concerns. I know there were a couple I didn't get to. Maybe I'll spend some more time as the week goes on answering your questions. But every single Tuesday, right here on Locked On Vols, we call it the mailbag edition of the show. I'm Eric Kane. Can't thank you guys enough for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, I will have my new studio built in the next couple of days. Just give me some time. I moved over the weekend, so a lot of boxes laying around. But as always, guys, tell your friends about this show. Subscribe to the channel. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. It's how this show grows. And let's do it again tomorrow. This is Locked On Vols.